Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The same problem that Mercedes dealt with over the last few years during their period of dominance is now starting to affect Red Bull. Their top senior engineers getting poached by other organisations. Two individuals very knowledgeable and important to the Red Bull car design and concept are going to Ferrari, it seems, over the next season or so. What does this mean for Red Bull? Could this potentially slow down their current progression? Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Firstly, I thought this was kind of remarkable, just to show that Formula 1 in America is not necessarily going as swimmingly as F1 or let's just say FOM, Formula 1 management, may have hoped, because there's still plenty of tickets. If you guys want to go to the Miami Grand Prix, there's plenty of tickets still available here. This is down at Turn 1, the grandstands, B9, C1, you're miles away from the track to be honest, but these tickets are being sold for up to $3,600 per ticket, basically. Like, this is pretty outrageous stuff for, I don't know, I guess they think Miami, the glitz, the glam, all this stuff, it's going to be big in America, and like Formula 1's good in America, and I think COTA is definitely a great circuit, and the Texas Grand Prix is definitely one to go to, or the United States Grand Prix, whatever they call it. But yeah, Miami, I'm not so convinced about this one, and I think it is showing in the fact that a lot of these tickets are not being sold, and I think after last year, after some of the difficult experiences and poor experiences that some had, I think even like the catering and stuff was pretty terrible for some of the VIPs. A lot of people don't want to return. So yeah, I don't know if Miami will really go past its contract length date, to be honest, just because Vegas is likely to become the Monaco of the US at the very least, if not just the Monaco of the entire sport. So big story there, but let's talk about Red Bull. Ferrari have been doing some simulations behind the scenes and have determined that if they were able to stall the beam wing, so the wing kind of, the rear of the car just below the rear wing itself, if they were able to stall out the downforce that generates with the DRS open, they would be able to generate an extra 8 kph in a straight line, which is pretty much exactly what Red Bull generate in a straight line compared to the opposition when they put their DRS on. A very efficient DRS for this particular reason. So Ferrari have figured out what Red Bull are doing to achieve this. Obviously, it's another level to actually figure out how to make it happen. But very interesting, we'll see in a second, that one of the engineers that Ferrari are supposedly poaching from Red Bull is very much involved in the development of the DRS system on the Red Bull, which is maybe quite indicative from a Ferrari perspective on what we might expect them to do here in the near future. Speaking of Red Bull, some positive things as well. Their new wind tunnel is going to be online, I believe, in 2025. They're using one that's very old now. People say that Adrian Newey doesn't need a wind tunnel. He sees it all in his head anyway, which is probably true, but that's coming online soon, so that will give Red Bull some degree of a boost. One thing that maybe isn't quite so ideal for them is that they've made some tweaks to their car. We reckon a 0.2 of a second or something upgrade in Baku. That's what the rumours said. And at the front of their car, especially at the front of the inlet to the side pod, there's some rumours that with the budget cap as it is, they probably can't touch this area again. But in Miami, they'll bring some further tweaks to this. So the Red Bull car's so good, it's probably going to be tweaks from here on out, but some additional changes that will give them extra lap time and performance, and it's going to make it even harder for other cars to catch up. Mercedes say they can catch Red Bull by the end of the season, but by the end of the season, will Red Bull be even further in the distance, which is the issue you have when you're playing catch up, or they'll just decide Red Bull to give up on this year's car because they've won everything anyway and move on to next year, and then maybe there's a win or two that go to other teams at the end of the season, but until then it's not looking so good. And even Toto Wolff is giving some optimism for Mercedes, suggesting that they were very far from the perfect setup window. This is the issue with just one practice session. The teams can't get it perfect, which arguably can be good, right? It puts more pressure on the engineers to get it right after just one practice. Red Bull have historically struggled a little bit more with that than their opposition, and even if they did struggle with that tier, doesn't matter because their car's so good anyway. Even if it's not in the right setup window, probably won't matter too much. For Mercedes, it meant that they were getting held back from their potential, so maybe Toto Wolff's a bit more positive that if they'd have got their setup right, they would have been, maybe even he believes, the second fastest car. But Ferrari, of course, in the hands of Charles Leclerc, were pretty damn good as well. And speaking of Ferrari, they are trying to slow down Red Bull as much as they possibly can. They've also not been happy about, when Laurent Mekies, right, so he is leaving Ferrari to join AlphaTauri as their new team boss next year, and this was announced by Red Bull before Ferrari even got to tell their employees internally that he was going to be leaving. So they weren't happy about that. I believe even Ted Kravitz mentioned this on one of his notebooks, that they weren't happy that Red Bull kind of jumped the gun on that one, and felt like they were kind of getting embarrassed by Red Bull pushing ahead with these announcements. So Ferrari are looking to take revenge, and that involves some of the senior team engineers at Red Bull. Now, Adrian Newey, of course, also is the top guy. He's their chief technical officer. Now, he actually isn't employed by Red Bull Racing. He's a contractor, but, you know, it's budget cap shenanigans. They're trying to get around it. But the rumor has it that it's been reported now that he's going to stay on at Red Bull. This is not exactly a surprise. There's been recent discussions between Adrian Newey and Christian Horner that they're going to find an arrangement where he's going to stay on designing cars for Red Bull into the future. And of course, that makes perfect sense, all things considered. But outside of Adrian Newey, there are two key figures that are going to be coming to Maranello from Milton Keynes that are practically confirmed. This has been rumored for a few days now, and every day we seem to get some more implications as to who it might potentially be. This is one of the names. The other name we don't really seem to know, but this is the number 3 engineer at Red Bull Racing, the head of aerodynamics, Enrico Balbo, who is rumored to be heading to Ferrari for the start of next season. He has worked very closely, of course, with Adrian Newey and Pierre Vache. I have no idea how you would have pronounced that. Apologies, I'm terrible with pronunciation, so we'll just leave it there for now. But he was formerly at Mercedes during some of their golden days, 2014, 2017, then went to Red Bull. So this is the issue that Mercedes dealt with plenty of years ago now, and even in the period, 2019, 2020, where especially teams like Red Bull were hiring a lot of guys from either the engine department or the aero department of Mercedes and bringing them into Red Bull. This is just how it goes. Your top guys at a company, let's say you're Mercedes, you're dominating for a few years, your top guys are going to get targeted. They're going to go, Red Bull are going to offer him more money. He's going to go there and wants a new challenge, wants a new environment. And this is how it goes in Formula One. These guys don't get paid an outrageous amount of money, especially now the cost cap is in place. If someone offers to double their salary, they're going to go for it, right? So this has been a thing for Mercedes they've had to deal with, the massive turnover that those teams can have when the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, all the other teams that want to compete are going to pay money, Aston Martin, for example, to get Mercedes guys into their team. Red Bull are now experiencing the same thing. Dan Fallows, former Red Bull guy, went to Aston Martin this last season, and now Red Bull are losing more members of staff. Now, they can manage the turnover and everything, but this is maybe what we feel like might have happened with Mercedes, that over the last several years, they lost some key employees. James Allison kind of took a bit of a step back. Their team doesn't seem as strong as it was before, and maybe there's other reasons why Mercedes have had a bit of a decline, but this might well be one of them. So now Red Bull, you're starting to see a similar process emerge where other teams look at the top guys, offer them more money or whatever, and get them to join their team. So the head of aero at Red Bull is rumored to be heading to Ferrari, and the other name is not exactly clear at the moment, but the other engineer that's meant to be joining is apparently one that's played a very key role in the development of the Red Bull's DRS system. So Enrico Balbo, this has been essentially confirmed, it seems, by many sources, but the second is, from most people's perspective, it seems, even more important and even more knowledgeable about the Red Bull concept. We don't know if it's this Pierre character, just because he's also a top guy like Balbo is, so we're wondering what's happening there, but I think people seem to believe it's probably not him, because there's been recent discussions about contract extensions, so that's probably going to stay as it is. But it's very interesting to see that Red Bull guys, top guys at Red Bull, are now getting targeted to be joining elsewhere. Even last year, I believe, there was rumours that one of the Mercedes engine guys was getting nicked by Red Bull, so this is just how it goes. There's a lot of turnover between these top teams, but now you've got Aston Martin also coming into the fray. They signed a lot of, I think, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull employees over the last few years. Ferrari apparently are targeting about 10 more engineers they want to bring in. Maybe it's 10, including these couple, but yeah, still, Ferrari making a big recruitment drive. They're turning over a fair bit of their team, and you wouldn't be surprised if many of those names are coming from Red Bull. It's how it tends to go. The team gets to the top, the guys that are there, they get offered more money to go and do a new challenge. That's how things go. Helmut Marko's practically confirmed this as well, so he says, yeah, Lauren McKees will be team principal at AlphaTauri. There was some gardening leave, so you can't do deals, but the names that are going around aren't going to be part of the deal. So interesting debate there that he kind of confirms that, yeah, there are some names being discussed that are going to be leaving Red Bull. There's no kind of relationship there with McKees going to AlphaTauri, which is part of Red Bull, and the other guys going the other way. But there's this gardening leave, right? You can't leave Red Bull now and join Ferrari next week. They basically put a hold on that until the end of the season, so you can't transfer too much information. But the reality is, what Red Bull were doing, right? And that's the thing, right? If they get one of these guys that's been very much heavily involved in either their straight up head of aero or whether in their DRS system, then Ferrari get access to his information, right? His knowledge in his head. Now, they can stop him bringing over the actual blueprints of their car. Of course, he can't give them to Ferrari, but he remembers what was in his head, and of course, he can put that onto paper, and they can benefit as a result. So obviously, this should be a boost for Ferrari in the kind of medium to longer term, but also it should hurt Red Bull to some extent compared to the rest of their opposition. If they're losing top guys, maybe they've got secondary guys that can step step up into those roles and do a phenomenal job. That is part of Christian Horner's job, and that's been part of Toto Wolff's job at Mercedes to manage that over the last few years. But it still is a potential weakness for Red Bull Racing over the next couple of seasons, especially when they might well have more competition going forwards. We're still expecting Mercedes to make progress as we would with Ferrari, but Aston Martin are very much still in the fight as well, and Fernando Alonso has pretty much confirmed he is planning to race until at least 2025, he says. I think in 2024 we've got a chance to win. I think in 2025 we can have another chance as well. So he's very keen on continuing to race at least until the end of this current cycle of regulations. 2026 are going to be brand new regulations, of course. Hopefully smaller, lighter cars. We'll see about that. But you would expect that from now over the next couple of years, the challenge for Red Bull is going to get increasingly more difficult. And just one final thing to mention here. Just wanted to shout out Yuki Tsunoda because he's only got 2 points, which is the same as Zhou has, I believe. And Zhou's also done a pretty good job. But Yuki Tsunoda's been doing very well, I thought, in this AlphaTauri. P11, P11, P10, P10. Only 2 points on the board, but has been outperforming Nick de Vries every weekend and has been outperforming his car, to be honest. Incredibly impressive stuff. And I know there's been some discussion, Tsunoda to Red Bull, when's it going to happen? Now, obviously, you're not going to replace Perez at the moment because he's doing a very good job. But, Tsunoda is definitely making a good case that in the coming couple of years, he might well be trying to target that Red Bull seat. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.